Good afternoon. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Economic Development and Regulatory Services Committee for today, May 7th. I've been joined by council members Cano, Fletcher, Gordon, Ellison, and Cunningham, which is everybody on the committee. We have a very brief consent agenda this morning. They include the liquor license approvals for this cycle, as well as the liquor license renewals, gambling license approvals. Item number 6 is accepting a grant, and 7 is authorizing extension of up to 1 year for our Great Streets business support programs. Item number 8 has a small amendment. So I'll first move the consent agenda items 3 through 7. Are there any comments on any of those items or any items anyone would like to pull? Seeing none, on the motion to approve, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those items are approved. On item number 8, I have an amendment by Councilmember Cunningham. Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In front of my colleagues on the dais, and there are copies next to the City Clerk, are 3 amendments related to item number 8, which are the appointments to the Upper Harbor Terminal Community Planning and Engagement Committee. Madam Chair, with your permission, may I speak more to these motions?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So the first amendment is to amend the name of the committee from the Upper Harbor Terminal Community Planning and Engagement Committee to Upper Harbor Terminal Collaborative Planning Committee. This is a result of my inability to name things well. It is currently named, as I said, the Community Planning and Engagement Committee for short. However, there is, which is CPEC. Then there's also the Community Planning and Economic Development Department, which is CPED, and Community Performing Arts Center, which is a part of the Upper Harbor Terminal, which is CPAC. So CPEC, CPED, and CPAC. My apologies. This motion will address this by renaming the committee to the Upper Harbor Terminal Collaborative Planning Committee. The second is expanding this committee from 15 to 17 seats. And then the third amendment is to appoint Mr. Bill English and Paul Bachnight to the committee. These 2 gentlemen bring extraordinary experience, expertise, and connections to the table, both having worked for decades on the North Side. Mr. English is the executive director of the North Side Job Creation Team and has led major job creation focused on increasing wages of Northsiders. And Mr. Bachnight is an urban planner, formerly the director of placemaking at Urban Homeworks, and currently works at the Parks Foundation and is a fellow at the Minnesota Design Center. And so with those 3 amendments, I would like to move item number 8 as amended.
Item number 8 is in front of us. We'll first vote on the amendments. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That is approved. And then on the overall item with the amendments, further comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item is approved. We'll then move to our public hearing agenda, starting with item number 1. Lisa, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair and council members. My name is Lisa Schmeller, and I'm licensing inspector for the city of Minneapolis. I'm presenting an application from Sacre Bleu Enterprises, LLC, doing business as the Blue Door Longfellow, located at 3448 42nd Avenue South in Ward 12. Their current license is an on-sale wine and strong beer with no live entertainment, and they've been operating at this location since 2012. The applicant is requesting a permanent expansion of premises for a sidewalk cafe with seating for 15 and a bench for patrons to use while waiting outside. The business will use stanchions to define the space and ensure patrons don't obstruct the sidewalk. The diagram has been approved by Public Works on April 19th, 2019, meeting the standard requirements. Hours of operation: outdoor, the seating will stop at 9:30 p.m. and will close at 10 p.m. Indoor, Friday and Saturday, 8 a.m. to 12 a.m., Sunday through Thursday, 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. New business licensing operating conditions were signed on April 16th, 2019, and these will replace any previously approved conditions. On April 15th, 2019, public hearing notices were sent to residents and property owners within 300 feet of the premises. Notices were also sent to the Longfellow Community Council Association, Longfellow Business Association, and Council Member Andrew Johnson. We have received 10 responses from the public hearing notices, 4 in support and 6 with concerns. A review of 311 calls and police instances found no significant issues concerning the business. At this time, we recommend approval of a permanent expansion of premises for a sidewalk cafe for the Blue Door Longfellow. Thank you.
Lisa, could you just clarify for us, this is a liquor license expansion, or it's an expansion of the liquor license to the sidewalk cafe?
It's to add a sidewalk cafe, and then it will extend the liquor onto the premises outdoor man.
So they already have a liquor license?
Correct.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I could clarify that. Questions for staff? Councilmember Gordon.
I just have one question, or maybe it's two. It seemed a little bit unusual that we're rescinding a 2012 resolution with other conditions, and I couldn't find the old conditions. But it looks like as part of this process, we've also renegotiated the conditions. Can you tell us if there are any major changes from those original conditions to the ones we're doing today, or something that neighbors might want to be aware of?
Thank you,
Ms.
Madam
Roberts,
Chair.
welcome.
Councilmember Gordon. One of the stipulations in the old condition was that they wouldn't have a sidewalk cafe. So conditions did need to be renegotiated as part of this application.
And is that the only condition that's changed?
There were other items that were changed. There were some conditions regarding hours of operation that were changed, and some other minor things.
So they'll be operating later or closing earlier?
Operating later. And I believe as part of the process that's required through LIMS, that the rescinded items should be available to you.
Okay, I maybe
And
just haven't
I know I
clicked.
have them. So there's in the staff report through LIMS is the rescinded conditions and the ones that are being proposed.
Okay, thanks. I'll poke around a little more. Maybe I missed that.
Okay.
Further comments?
And I'm sorry if I may, we sometimes casually say, oh, there was a liquor license that is there already. It's an on-sale wine license that's there. It's not a full liquor license, so it's an on-sale wine license that is at this establishment now.
And now they're looking for on-sale wine with strong beer, not liquor.
On-sale wine with strong beer to extend out to the Sidewalk Cafe.
Are there other questions for staff? Thank you for your report. I want to welcome Councilmember Johnson to the public hearing. Thank you for being here today. We will open the public hearing on item number 1, which is considering the application for an expansion of premise for on-sale wine and beer to a sidewalk cafe and for the sidewalk cafe. Is there anyone here to speak to this issue? Now, first 4 people signed up in advance. How many people would like to speak? Raise your hands. It's okay if you didn't sign up. Raise them high so I can see. So it's not a huge number. So why don't we ask the applicant to speak first, and then everyone else who'd like to speak. Please everyone state your name and address for the record. Welcome.
Hello, thank you. I'm Jane Fallhaber. I'm the general manager at Blue Door Longfellow, 3448 42nd Avenue South. I am representing ownership today. Just some background on our business. We're a family-friendly, juicy-loosey spot, popular with tourists, families in the neighborhood. 70% of our sales last year were from food, 30% from beer and wine. We define ourselves as a restaurant, not a bar. Our goal for the Sidewalk Cafe is to create a small, quiet outdoor space for our customers to enjoy the nice weather. We also want to compete with neighboring restaurants in our area, all who have outdoor seating. Just some background on what we've been working on towards this meeting. We've been working with the licensing office for almost 2 years now, and with the surrounding neighbors trying to just like curb any problems, or have some great discussions with the neighbors and work out complaints and that kind of stuff. So in our most recent meeting with the surrounding neighbors, we presented our sketch for the Sidewalk Cafe and also our operating conditions, and we asked them to vocalize their concerns. The 5 biggest concerns they came up with were sidewalk space and encroachment on the walking area, the restaurant smell, closing at midnight on weeknights, loud customers late at night, and people loitering on our Sidewalk Cafe furniture after hours. So as a result of that meeting, we worked with Lisa and Linda in the licensing office, and we agreed to changes in our operating conditions, and we changed the plans for our Sidewalk Cafe. We altered our Sidewalk Cafe plans to include stanchions, so we clearly define that boundary so customers can't encroach on the walking area. We can make sure that there's still plenty of room for a wheelchair or someone walking a dog to get by. And then we agreed to move our closing time Sunday through Thursday to 11 p.m. And so I know we talked about this a little bit. So it originally was midnight, but we have agreed to move that back in our operating conditions. So it'll be we're not changing our hours, they'll be staying the same. And then we agreed to have staff consistently remind our patrons to please be quiet on their exiting the building. It'll also be printed on our receipts, so every customer gets a receipt with like their food and what they drank, and it'll say, as you're exiting the building, please be respectful of our neighbors and keep your noise to an absolute minimum. We also have signs posted at all of our doors that say that, and we have signs posted on the sidewalk as well. We will clean our vents 3 times a year. We're only required to do it twice, but to help curb the smell, which was a major concern with the neighbors, we'll clean them 3 times. And the business we work with says that the more you clean them, the less it'll smell, basically. And then we'll lock our tables and chairs up to ensure that no one can sit and loiter in the cafe after hours after our staff has gone home. And then in our operating conditions, it actually says that we'll meet or we'll have an email discussion after the sidewalk cafe is up and running monthly to curb any new concerns and make sure the neighbors are comfortable. In closing, we'd like to say we love our neighborhood. We're extremely happy to have this opportunity to serve customers outside in the beautiful Minnesota summer. We ask that you pass our operating conditions and our sidewalk cafe application today. We believe we've gone above and beyond what's normal for this situation to make our neighbors comfortable. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. So anyone else who would like to speak, please feel free to step forward, state your name and address for the record, and you could line up. For efficiency, I'll keep an eye on it. If you can keep it to 2 or 3 minutes, that would be good. We're not going to completely cut you off, but I might remind you of that. Also remember, it's not a Q&A. You're just providing testimony to us. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Brad Carberry. I live at 3504 41st Avenue, just right around the corner from the Blue Door. I'm here to express my opposition to the Sidewalk Cafe and the expanded hours, which may not even be an issue anymore. When I first looked at this, I wanted to be fair to the Blue Door and compare them to the other businesses in the area. What I found is they're not really like most of the other businesses in the area. From looking at the primary zoning district map on plate 28, it kind of shows our neighborhood. Looking at all the other C1s that are all by themselves, that aren't part of a corner or a whole street full of businesses, they're the only thing that's a business. There's a single family home, there's an apartment building, and there's an empty lot. So right away, they're kind of unusual in that they're a restaurant all by themselves in a neighborhood. So since I couldn't compare them to something just like them, I just compared them to all the other restaurants in the area. And this is documents that I submitted via email to all you guys, so you've probably seen them. The hours that, even their current hours they're open later than really almost everyone else in the area. So that was our biggest problem with expanding to being open until midnight. It's just no one else in our neighborhood is open that late. The other problem that we have with the Sidewalk Cafe is the size of the sidewalk. I know that they submitted a drawing, and most of the information on the drawing is correct. It's just not necessarily to scale. They have an 8'6" wide sidewalk, and leaving a 4 foot wide area for ADA access, that leaves them a 4'6" area for their Sidewalk Cafe. And according to Minneapolis guidelines, all the activity of the Sidewalk Cafe has to fit within that area. So it's 4'6" wide. They want to see 2 people side by side. The basic minimum width of a person is 18 inches. So already you're looking at 36 inches just for 2 people standing there, not even sitting in a chair. And they're supposed to have wait staff and everything else inside that 4 feet also. I don't see how that's even possible. Just the normal operation of the business is going to encroach on the 4 foot sidewalk, which according to Minneapolis regulations is going against the regulation.
Okay, are you done?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. Who would like to speak next? I have a list, I can call you by name if you'd like. Susan, Lisa, or Pam, any of you? Sure, that'd be great.
Hi,
Welcome.
my name is Brandon Bobrick. I live in New Brighton at 1781 Long Lake Road. And I know you said it's not Q&A, but if I had a question or two, I was wondering if you might be able to clarify it for me. My email I got was said this was a meeting about the involving with the Upper Harbor Terminal project in North Minneapolis on the 4th Ward. And give me a minute too if I stutter or if I need a second to think. Sometimes I
So this
say really goofy
public
things, but other
hearing
times, yeah.
is about a liquor license at the Blue Door in Longfellow.
Okay,
Would you like to speak on that issue?
not really.
So do you have questions about the Upper Harbor Terminal issue?
I wouldn't say so much questions. I didn't know it was an issue either, but I have.
Project. That item's been taken up already, but if you have questions, I'm pretty sure Eric Hanson is here and would be happy to answer your questions.
Sure.
Would
Yeah.
that work good for you?
Eric Hanson?
He's going to raise his hand right behind you.
Hi.
Excellent. Why don't you guys talk out in the hall and see if he can answer your questions?
Could I just wing it?
No, because that item's not in front of us. What's in front of us is the Longfellow
Okay. Can I ask
Grill.
questions that aren't regarding the project? Because I'm not that familiar. I've never been to a city council meeting, and I really don't know. I think a lot of people might not know exactly what goes on in it. Like, I don't know if you guys are all city councilmen for the city of Minneapolis, or you guys just part of, and I noticed there's some seats that have names, like mayor, I don't see him. I'm just curious, like, how does this work?
Mr. Hanson will help address those questions for you
Okay.
outside in the hall, right now, actually.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming down. Okay, so let's see. Is Susan, Pam, or Lisa wanting to speak?
Hello, thank you for the opportunity. My name's Lisa Anderson. I'm at 3430 42nd Avenue South, so I'm a half a block north of Blue Door. Been a resident of Longfellow for probably 17 years, so I was there at the very beginning when Blue Door was there. Just want on the record, I am opposed to the Sidewalk Cafe on Blue Door for a couple of reasons. I won't reiterate all the good work Brad has done related to the concerns about the size of the sidewalk. I think that is a concern. We have very active neighborhood, lots of dog walkers, and I think we're going to be impeding some of the that kind of activity. Also, I want to speak a little bit to the uniqueness of the location. I know we need to be equitable with what similar businesses can do in the area, but I think what's important to understand about this location is that it isn't a commercial corner. I mean, Blue Door is the only business on the corner. It's across the street from a middle school, and the other two corners are residential. So I think that's very different than some of the locations that are comparable. And then kind of my third point on the location is my block is unique in that we have an alley that you can only access at one point. It does not go all the way through. So the alley entrance adjacent to Blue Door is the only way that I can get into my property. I can't get in from the other area. So I think too there's a potential there for additional considerations. Then I wanted to speak a little bit to our history with Blue Door. I really want to give Jane a lot of credit for the work she's done in the past 18 to 20 months. I've seen numerous improvements. However, I do think, going back to some history, I personally have some concerns about Blue Door's ownership and their willingness to be a good neighbor. I think, we've had some situations over the years, and I don't want to bring up old history, but I still am concerned about the engagement of the ownership in, making sure that any conditions agreed to are adhered to. And then kind of my third kind of concern here is around the process, and I know the city has really good intentions to be transparent and make sure everybody is heard. And I appreciate that. However, I think in this situation, we've had a few glitches. A couple of them, I'll mention just a couple of them. I believe that the notification to the neighbors within 300 feet, we missed some people. One of my neighbors made a public records request and was not able to get that information prior to this hearing and to prepare. And then third, I think the dialogue and the process related to the city inspection and what's a violation and what isn't a violation and how the neighbors should report things has been somewhat of a just very unclear and seems to have a changing process. I heard somebody say that there have been no violations in the past 12 months. I know that's not true because I myself have reported some. I think, going forward, whatever we decide here, we need to have a little bit more clarity and consistency within how we're monitoring things that are happening. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Would Pam or Susan like to speak?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to come here and express our concerns. My name is Susan Winckelmann. I'm living at 3504 41st Avenue South in Minneapolis. And I agree with everything that my neighbors and friends have stated in opposition to the Sidewalk Cafe. And I just wanted to add one point that I didn't hear any of them say, was regarding the lateness of how the Sidewalk Cafe would be open until 10 p.m. We object to that. We would prefer, if you are going to be approving it, to have it be an earlier hour so that it doesn't go past dark. And so that's something that we did not see in the application, was regarding any lights that would be happening to be open until 10 p.m. So we would prefer that food would be stopped, orders would stop at 8:30 and it would close at 9 if you're going to approve the Sidewalk Cafe. So that's what I have.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak to this issue? Anyone? Anyone? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing. Councilmember Johnson, did you want to make a comment?
Yes, Madam Chair. Thank you for allowing me to just speak at the meeting. And I want to thank our residents for coming out and speaking, and the applicants for being here today. And I know it's a quasi-judicial matter on the sidewalk application, so we'll let the committee do their business with that, of course. I did want to add the context of been working with neighbors for the past 5+ years on this issue, and there's a lot of complicated history here, and there was a lot of damaged trust. I think I'd like to throw this out there on the record because I think the committee would like to know that our staff really have gone above and beyond, working in a way that I haven't seen them work anywhere else in my ward, in trying to help bring together the business and neighbors to the same table to try to work through issues together as much as possible. I just want the committee to know that and to recognize especially Linda Roberts for all of her work, and our NCR staff as well who've done that. It's certainly this idea of the sidewalk seating, there's concerns there given some of the historical context around that. It's no secret for Blue Door to know that should the committee approve this sidewalk application today, that there will be a lot of eyes on them, making sure that the right-of-way isn't blocked. I also hope Blue Door recognizes how much of an asset Jane has been in working with residents. And if the Blue Door ownership was here today, which I'm sorry that they're not, I would hope that that message gets back to them as well, and they recognize that, because our neighbors have valid concerns. Our neighbors, this is really an exceptional situation with where this small business is located in the community and the impact it has on the surrounding residents. And there's other concerns as well that I have around this. For instance, the expansion of the hours, which I understand is in our code, and that they actually have more leeway than what they have agreed to. And so I think that's an opportunity beyond this question of the sidewalk application, is how do we as a city strike a better balance to the context of and the relationship between people living in close proximity and the effect that they have on one another. So again, I appreciate everyone coming out today and the committee's consideration of this.
Thank you. Now that the public hearing is closed, are there any members of the council who would like to speak or make a motion on this issue? Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll just say I'm very impressed. I think in the last year and a half that I've been on this committee, this was one of the most thorough sort of responses to some of the community feedback. It feels like Blue Door is really working hard to make this a really positive thing. And I'll just say, as someone who represents neighborhoods that have lots of patios and they're like the best social spaces that everybody really enjoys, I'm happy to approve this today, or move to approve this.
Okay, further comments or questions? Seeing none, on the motion to approve, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item is approved, and I would urge you to continue to communicate with your neighbors to ensure that this is a success. Thank you for being here today. We'll move on then to the public hearing and item number 2, which is a building permit fee ordinance. And that is being presented by Mr. Poor. Thank you for being here today.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, council members. I'm here today to talk about an amendment to our fee schedule. And what brought us here today is we had somewhat of an anomalous situation with our inflator that's tied to fees. A few years back, with the guidance of Chairman Quincy of the Ways and Means, we had put an auto inflator tied to the Consumer Price Index and the Construction Cost Index. And that had worked well. We were able to increase fees commensurate with those rates. This year, in spite of all the construction that we've had in the metro area, Minneapolis in particular, we had an anomalous inversion that occasionally happens with the Construction Cost Index. So the CPI was running at 2.1%, and that affects what are called value-based permits. So if you value what a finished building looks like, that's where that permit fee comes from. The Construction Cost Index is used for what's called unit-based permits. So that's if you put in, for instance, toilets, plumbing fixtures, elevators, things like that. That index, at some point towards the end of last year in Chicago and Minneapolis, inverted and went to 0. Now, nationally, this happens in certain markets. It tends not to happen on the East Coast and West Coast. Maybe that's something to do with geographic barriers. But it is something that happens. And so because of that, we had kind of this unusual unhinging of the two permit fees. They usually run in tandem at the same rate. It's how we put it into the computer system. It's predictable for contractors. So what we did is we went back and first off had to figure out what happened with this CCI. We did the research. And we found out based on Engineering News record, which is kind of the record for these kind of things, that this does happen. They also recommended that municipalities and cities that do peg to these inflators, particularly the CCI, use the basket of 20 metropolitan areas that makes up that basket for the inflator and not tie it to your market. That is what we have gone back and amended. That's what we're proposing today. The director's fee schedule will go up at 2%. And so what we're asking here today is just to approve this change so that we can continue with a more predictable inflator on our fees, not have to come back to council. So with that, I'll take any questions that you have.
Are there any questions for Mr. Poor on item number 2? Seeing none, thank you for your report.
Great.
We'll open the public hearing on item number 2, which is amending Title 5, Chapter 91, related to building code permit fees, amending the regulation related to value and unit-based categories of permit fee adjustments, as well as approving the 2019 director's fee schedule with a 2% increase over the 2018 director's fee schedule. Is there anyone here to speak to that issue? Anyone? Anyone? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Councilmember Ellison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be happy to move this item for approval.
Item number 2 has been moved. Further comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item is approved. We'll then move to item number 9, which is a discussion item on the rental repair revolving fund staff direction. Ms. Keller, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Kim Keller from Regulatory Services, joined as well by Mark Ruff, who will be able to answer questions that are financially related should they come up. As part of last year's budget process, the council and mayor recognized a need to increase tools available to repair rental properties as part of renter-centric housing initiatives. The adopted budget allocates $2 million to be spent over time for this purpose and recovered through assessments on property taxes. Before accessing the funds, Regulatory Services and Finance were directed to develop policy guidance and report back to council. So we are here today and will be before Ways and Means next week to provide this update and request access to the funds. In developing the policy guidance, the departments identified two paths for which the funds can be used. The first is the Tenant Remedies Act, or Emergency Tenant Remedies Act, which authorizes the city, directly impacted renters, or qualified neighborhood organizations to request an action through the court system. Should the action be granted, an administrator can be appointed who takes over temporarily management of the building, including hiring contractors and making required repairs. Repairs that are overseen by the administrator are restricted to what is needed to bring the property back to compliance to our housing maintenance code. The second path currently exists in city ordinance, but has not been activated. So section 244.180 authorizes the Director of Regulatory Services to create an emergency board that can work outside the court system and therefore more quickly for emergency repairs. And only repairs with significant life safety risk are eligible. So I have a few program elements to lay out for each track for you. As I mentioned, with the TRA, the city, the renters in the building, or the neighborhood organization focused on housing-related issues can bring the action forward. Should the court find in favor of the request, the administrator can be appointed. The administrator has fiduciary responsibility and works on behalf of the residents. The city can suggest the administrator, but ultimately the decision of who that is rests with the court. Complicated repairs or repairs that take up a portfolio are good candidates for a TRA because there's a lot of staff time involved in managing all of those particulars. A limitation to working through this process is the court system itself and the amount of time that it can take. Even an emergency action can take 10 days. The fund revolves, meaning that the repair and administrator costs are assessed back to the property owner on their property taxes and then put back into city funds. It's a multi-year process, and so it can take up to 5 years to see full cost recovery on those funds. Oops. Other way. We've been actively pursuing TRAs as a department. We have formalized our process and are prepared to act on this. At a very high level, the action led by the city begins with a manager reviewing the case, the city attorney reviewing the violation to make sure it's eligible, and then the city attorney actually carries that action forward with the court. The Emergency Repair Board, as I said, is authorized in Chapter 244.180. There is no court involvement. Instead, the board consists of city staff. Standing up the board would fulfill a programmatic gap because it's poised to be able to operate more quickly than the court process. So if approved, Regulatory Services would actually enter into contracts with qualified contractors who would be at the ready and able to make these repairs. Examples include low or no heat situations, health concerns resulting from emergency plumbing issues, or exposed or illegal wiring. Just like in a TRA or ETRA, the repair costs would be assessed to the property owner and paid over time. Unlike them, the programmatic costs are not recaptured. Regulatory Services will keep track of these costs, though, so that we have an understanding of what the staff time involved is. And there are multiple steps still needed to stand this up, including the ordinance changes themselves and internal process development. As I said, the process is still in development, but basic overview would include the manager reviewing the case. Whenever a violation would be issued for these, the board or the board meeting itself would be noted at that time so that it coincides with the due date. If the repair is if the order is abated, then the meeting would be canceled, and if not, the board would have two options available to it that we'd be taking. One could be an extension, and the other would be authorizing this contract. Any questions at all?
Are there any
presentation?
questions for Ms. Keller? Councilmember Ellison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to get some clarification on the fund recovery for the board process. So you're saying, so we'd still get the money for the repairs, but just not for staff time, that kind of thing. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, through the chair, Councilor Ellison. Yes, that's correct. State statute has strict parameters on reimbursement.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Just wanted that clarification.
Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. How clear is the line between what's emergency or life-threatening and what's not? Sort of, how are we deciding which path we go on with which repairs?
Through the chair, Councilmember Fletcher. Some of that will be determined as we're putting together our internal policy guidance, and we'll do that in consultation with the city attorney's office to make sure it meets our legal standards. But we really are looking at those situations which constitute high-risk life safety violations. We do have a number of those, or we have those already outlined as part of our tiering, so we can understand which violations fall into which category. I would imagine it'd be a subset of those even.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had two questions. The first is, I know that the board is going to be taking, it will be faster than the typical 10 days. Is there an estimate just based on kind of like process of how long it would take then?
Through the chair, Councilmember Cunningham, my intention is to stand up the board immediately upon the due date of the repair. So if it's a no heat situation and there are 24 hours to correct, that the board would be able to conduct its business the next day. If it's that we'll have to bear out, we'll have to figure out how to make that happen in a way, but I've heard from the city attorney's office that as long as we provide the proper notice with the violation to the property owner, that can stand.
Great. And how has getting this information out to tenants been taken into consideration? Because I'm just thinking about folks who are in my ward who have reached out. For example, an elderly woman who her kitchen sink wasn't working, and so she was having to wash her dishes in her bathtub, for example. Like she had no operating sink for like months before she called, and she even knew me. Like, and it just like it didn't register as like this is something I would go to the city for. So. As we're building this out, how is tenant communications taken into consideration?
Thank you, Chair Goodman, Councilmember Cunningham. I would say there's a couple different paths. So for the TRA option, which can have the neighborhood organization as part of this, or the renters that are directly affected, we already planned to have all of our inspectors go out and try and meet with neighborhood organizations this summer to kind of meet and greet and share updates, hear what's important to them, and this would be part of the message that they would carry. And then if organizations needed the information in a different form, we would be happy to work with them on that form. For the emergency repair board or for the TRA as well, a lot of the city-led pieces will come through the rental licensing and complaint inspections, and they'll come directly from the inspectors. So the best thing that I would say for your resident is to call and make their complaints and get them registered, and talk about them in a way that is a life safety matter. We'll make sure we get out there right away, we'll found the complaint, and then if the property owner cannot abate it, we'll be able to have other avenues available.
Madam Chair, may I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
A concern that a lot of my constituents also have is around retaliation for contacting the city for help. How does this take that into consideration? Like, does this have, minimal impact on the landlord? Like, I'm just curious as to, because like I said, it didn't even register to her, even though she supported me for council, and it didn't register that was something she should go to the city for. And so I think that one piece is to be able to, if we can send out the information to all renters directly to them somehow, but then also just how does preventing retaliation from maybe less than high quality landlords, for example, how does that play into accessing this resource?
council members. We do have, retaliation is defined in our maintenance code, and it's defined as, the city attorney can help clarify my language on here, pull up the ordinance itself, but is defined, in my understanding, as impacting whether or not a resident is allowed to live in that building or can live in that building within 90 days of the complaint being made. So it's a time-bound piece. So there are some protections in there, but I do understand that they are limited protections. And it seems to me as though this is part of a larger culture change. Your question is maybe part of a larger culture change that the department is making and the city is making, and how we're reducing barriers, building trust, and making sure that people not only know what their rights are, but feel empowered to make them.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Further questions for staff on the presentation? Seeing none, I'm going to move approval of the staff recommendation. Thank you for making the TRA process more normalized. I think it's really important for us to have that tool to be able to work towards that, as well as making sure that the emergency fund takes care of fixing things that landlords refuse to do. And that's really the disconnect, is that we have gone out and inspected, and we've told them to fix it, and they've ignored it. And so now we're going to have a way to go ahead and fix these life safety issues ourselves. And I think that that's necessary at this point in a handful of properties. Further comments or questions? Seeing none on my motion to approve, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That item is approved. Seeing no further business before us, we are adjourned.